Cool. Going live. um, so I put a post up a couple of days ago from a video that was shared on was shared on an LAUSD social media about how there's no such thing as good or bad foods, and about food shaming and stuff like that. And I think there's a lot of nuance to kind of work out among that. So let me bring in, because I'm not, but I think there's a lot of stuff to kind of work out here and find some common ground. How are you, sir?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, no, I think this is an important topic that seems to get lost sometimes in the online wellness nutrition.
Yeah. So the video I referenced it was disturbing for me. Again, as like a layperson who I try to live a healthy lifestyle, with my diet and everything like that. But I think that what it is like, it's trying to combat the body shaming, the fat phobia, stuff like that. And maybe going too far in the other direction. But can you just introduce, so what your background is in nutrition?
Yeah, so I have a PhD in nutrition and health promotion. And this last piece, the health promotion piece, I think is what's important, because a lot of times we see these, people who have, nutritional biochemistry or even like really very science-based backgrounds. And there's a different level of training. There's a different considerations that need to be taken into account. I had a much different type of PhD than most people do, especially even in nutrition, than most people do in nutrition, because a lot of people are doing nutrition and they're doing, lab work and basic science work. Whereas for me, I was running programs in community centers. I was working with low-income populations. I was putting together and teaching programs to help people improve their nutrition. So I got a lot of firsthand experience as to, some of the challenges and difficulties and really the things that people really need to be focusing on a more population level. And in some of these more marginalized communities that aren't necessarily represented by some of the content that we see on the online space, that to be a little bit more exclusive and elitist, and some of the things that are promoted are just inaccessible to some of these individuals who they still need to improve their health and still need to make changes with their nutrition, but they can't buy $7 tortilla chips as opposed to the $2 ones. And so this is where I feel like a lot of this gets lost in the online space, because a lot of the messaging is geared towards individuals of higher income and individuals who tend not to represent the large majority of the population. And that's where, sometimes I feel like the messaging, like I mentioned, as in our discussion, some of that nuance is lost. And because you're not like these individuals who are communicating, who have large podcasts and things like that in various fields. Number one, most of them don't have nutrition backgrounds and didn't really, they have basic science and understanding of physiology and biology and those type of things. But health promotion is completely different than understanding the biological systems that occur, biological processes and things like that. It's, considering a totality of factors, including psychological health, including, access to different nutritional protocols or different nutrition recommendations. It's considering, affordability, and then really like what's going to make the biggest impact on long-term health and outcomes versus, what might make this one process improve that we hope might improve long-term health, but not necessarily, there's not really good data on that. And so really focusing for me, and this is where a lot of my content focuses on, is like, what are the big rocks that really people need to be focusing on, as opposed to what I would say a lot of what we see on social media and podcasts and things is minutia. It's people arguing about or discussing these very small things that might have a minor potential benefit, but it's interesting. It's fun to discuss those things. I mean, I like having conversations with other scientists about these things as well, but when we're communicating to a larger population, I think it's really important to make sure that we're getting the big messages across first, and then saving that other stuff for different discussions where we're not communicating to larger groups of people.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think what was like triggering for me with that video was when I taught in East LA, like a bunch of kids. I mean, a bunch. Like it wasn't like two or three. It was like you know a decent chunk. Every morning they would have a Monster energy drink and hot Cheetos, and that was their breakfast every morning. And I was just like, oh my gosh. I had a friend that was from like Inglewood growing up, like kind of in the hood, and he was a boxer. And after training, we go like, oh, let's go get something to eat. He's like, let's go to McDonald's. I was like, dude, no, let's not go to McDonald's. Let's get something a little healthy. He's like, what do you mean? He's like, there's nothing. Like he didn't even know that like there would be like the idea of healthy food and then non-healthy food. So that video was kind of like, oh, like shouldn't we advise them that there could be better choices to be made? But again, like, how do you feel about that? Because when it comes to things like I am kind of in the camp again, because I'm not an expert. That's why I want to talk to you about this of like, it's better to stay away from things like high fructose corn syrup or, you know, granulated sugar or something like that, as opposed to, you know, like stevia or whatever it is. And even like, maybe it's because like there's like you can be priced out of that kind of stuff. But wouldn't it be better to advise kids to make, like even at a liquor store where they buy the hot Cheetos and Monster, wouldn't there be a better option for them? And shouldn't we push that? That's kind of, I guess, where I'm thinking.
For sure. The challenge is that a liquor store carrying fresh fruit, for example, and then, you know, is a fresh fruit, you know, piece of an apple that costs almost the same amount as the hot Cheetos. It's going to be that, like, even if we put some advice around that. So I fully agree that we need to do better about educating kids about quality nutrition, about more nutrient dense foods versus less nutrient dense foods, about more energy dense foods versus less energy dense foods, how to incorporate these different foods into the diet, and how to build out a healthy dietary pattern overall. The issue, and I got tagged in your post, and that's why I actually commented on it.
Yeah.
It really just came down to we have to be really careful about the language that we use around food. And I was guilty of this in my early younger years as well, where I would say, you know, this is bad, got to stay away from this. But you realize when you actually start working with people, and you've worked with lots of people in this space, like I've worked with well over 1,000 people at this point through group programs, one-to-one programs, things like that, that language gets stuck in people's heads and can really damage their relationship with food, and can create patterns of thinking about food that is just so far removed from reality. Like some people start to believe that if they have one bite of this food, that it's going to cause all of these negative health, you know, implications, when the reality is that as long as you're meeting your nutrient needs, like you're eating a diet that's providing, you know, your baseline vitamins and minerals, and providing, you know, plenty of micronutrients and fiber, and you're not overeating, you know, having donuts, for example. I have donuts every Sunday before I play basketball, and it's not harming my health in the overall, you know, context of my dietary pattern. And I think we and it's hard to do, of course, but like we need to do a better job of helping to educate kids and educate the population overall on how to make healthier choices without creating these just using this language that causes these really negative reactions to food. Because like I saw a video earlier today that someone said our entire food system is poison, and you know, it was a comedian, it was on this major platform, it had like hundreds of thousands of likes, like over 1 million views, and him saying that, yeah, he may think, okay, this is going to help people make better choices and be more mindful of their nutrition. But what that's really going to do for a lot of people is when they walk into the grocery store, they're going to feel overwhelmed, they're going to feel anxious, they're going to feel like they have no choices, because they've been told by an individual that may not know what they're talking about, but they had a large platform, had a lot of, you know, likes, followers and all that, and that individual said it was poison. So that word poison sticks with you, and that word poison is used for a reason. It's used to get attention. And that's what a lot of what's going on social media around nutrition and the way that people talk about nutrition is they're using these words purposefully as a way to market, and they're using this as a way to get people's attention. And if I say something, my most high performing posts are where I start the post with, these are the foods that I would never eat, or these are the most inflammatory, because that, from a psychological standpoint, that's what works. And that's, unfortunately, that's why, you know, a lot of these major accounts that blow up and have millions of followers that are talking about nutrition, a lot of them have zero background in nutrition. They've never worked with anyone. They're just communicating messages that go viral because of the nature of the way that they're communicating messages, and it gets people's attention, but it's also, they don't understand the implications of what that's doing to someone's psychological well-being when they feel like they can't eat anything. Or other people, I can't tell you how many people I've worked with that they are scared to buy non-organic food, and so they're doubling, tripling their grocery bill, placing financial stress on themselves for no actual health benefit that's been demonstrated whatsoever. Non-organic food has very low pesticide residues, not in a dangerous zone based on multiple studies, and organic food also uses pesticides, which a lot of people don't understand. And it's just the way that a lot of the language is used around nutrition in these spaces is what where my issue comes in, because I see the back end of it of like, people are just scared, they're anxious about food, they're scared to eat certain foods. If they have a pizza, they feel guilty for like a whole day, you know. And it's all based on this wellness, you know, around this wellness culture around nutrition, where, you know, these people are pretending like they're eating these perfect diets. And a lot of these people who are sharing this type of stuff of saying, you know, seed oils are poison, for example, that's a very common one.
Yeah.
A lot of people are making all these crazy claims about seed oils. The evidence doesn't support that. And what that's leading people to have to do is, I can't eat, like I mentioned earlier, this tortilla chips that are $1.50, you know, and that, you know, of course, eating a whole bunch of tortilla chips, not a good thing. But replacing them for cassava chips that are cooked in coconut oil and still fried isn't improving anyone's health. And it's causing someone to have to pay. So these like, what is siete chips?
Yeah.
Ounce, they're 16 times as much as like a regular like tortilla chip. Health-wise, like, the improvement is marginal at best. And you have people saying, don't eat this because it's poison, and this is a better alternative. And the difference between the two is marginal at best. And you're making people, a lot of what's going on in this space is making people just feel like they have to you know, buy these expensive products. And it's largely centered around products, like, because the products are making people think they have to take certain supplements. You know, there's another, like Mark Hyman, for example, has a clip that I discussed a while back, where he said, you know, the nutrient levels in the food have declined over 50% over the last 50 years, and so we can't get all of our nutrients from food. That's not true, like, at all. That's simply not true. It's just a way to get people to believe that they need supplements so that he can turn around and sell supplements.
Yeah, there's so much there. I feel that too, because I listen to like Joe Rogan, and he has all these people on, some of the people that I mentioned that post, like, and then I if I eat, like, I don't really like donuts, but like if I would eat a donut, I'm like, there is a placebo effect of that, of like, oh, now I have this, it's messing up my gut microbiome and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I guess what you're saying is like the body's pretty resilient, and it can get nutrition out of a lot of things. Would you say that like seed oil, like, it's better to have olive oil, say, than seed oils, but it's like, it might not be worth it for everyone to make those kinds of like smaller choices? Like monk fruit might be better than granulated sugar, but it's at the end of the day, it's kind of like
so olive oil compared to seed oil is probably a bit more nutritious choice. But the reality is that most people just need to reduce the amount of oil they're consuming overall. Like,
yeah,
that's the real issue. And
yeah,
distracting people from the real issue is making all these stories up about seed oils and not just saying, hey, we just eat too many oils in general. If you're probably overeating if you're eating too many oils, because oils are really high in calories and low in density overall. So it's really easy to overeat if you're eating too many oils. So that, like, and the difference between seed oils and olive oils, I mean, it's marginal at best. Olive oil has, you know, various nutrients and stuff that many seed oils don't, and that's where, you know, some of the benefit comes from. But a lot of these influencers are recommending butter and other saturated fats over seed oils, which in multiple randomized controlled trials show that if you eat butter as opposed to a seed oil, the saturated fat has negative effects as opposed to the omega-6 linoleic acids, which, you know, these people try to claim are inflammatory, but there's really no evidence in humans to show that. I commented on a post the other day, and someone sent me these papers, and they were like, "You're wrong," and they showed me, you know, studies where they, and this is the stuff that people talk about on podcasts, is a study where they basically they isolated cells and they mixed the cells with the linoleic acid, and it shows an inflammatory response. But that doesn't happen when we eat these oils because they get metabolized for energy. It's not like it's not soaking a cell in the oil. It's these oils get utilized and metabolized for energy, and maybe a little bit will get into that cell, not enough to actually throw off the balance of omega-3 to omega-6 to the point where it's creating inflammation. But if you pull out these very specific studies, and you don't look at the whole body of literature on this topic, which is, in this kind of my thing, when some of the people you tag, like, that's what they do, is like, they'll pull out this one study and say, hey, you know, this study showed this, and the consumer is like, okay, well, now I have to do that. And then the next study showed one thing, and now I have to do that. And that's much different than discussing the body of literature in this very topic. Like, okay, what have we seen when we feed humans? And at the end of the day, the only thing that matters, the only studies that we should be really paying attention to when making decisions for our health, if they're available, sometimes they're not, but most of the times they are, because nutrition science has advanced a lot over the recent years, is we need to focus on what happens when we feed people this food. What outcome occurs when people are fed this food? And so you can make claims, like people can make claims about how higher omega-6 to omega-3 ratio can increase inflammation, but when we feed someone a couple tablespoons per day of these high omega-6 fatty acids, does it increase inflammation? No studies to demonstrate that. There's a rat study that, so like one of the guys you tagged, Max, he shared a rat study like a couple months ago, and it was a study of 8 rats that they gave canola oil to, and these rats gained weight because they were overfeeding them canola oil. They added it on top of their diet. So
which they would gain weight with any oil over fat.
Exactly. And weight gain is associated with negative health outcomes. So he was saying, oh, you shouldn't eat oils because they're toxic. But the reality was that these rats gained weight, and then they had some negative health outcomes as a result of the weight gain. But if you pull that one study, it makes it seem like these oils are toxic. Whereas if we look at the body of literature on that topic, it's very clear that this isn't the case.
So, yeah. So, like, if we can all agree, I mean, I'm assuming you agree that, like, obesity, especially this is for children. So childhood obesity is a real problem.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So sugar, is that true about the thing about sugar, that, like, when you infuse everything with sugar, everything has sugar now, ketchup and stuff like that, everything has sugar, that it doesn't help you to feel satiated. So you keep eating, you're more inclined to eat more. So I guess what I'm getting at is like, if you know that you're an alcoholic, you probably shouldn't have like a beer. And if you know you have this tendency to overeat, maybe stay away from those things that are like, you can't have just one, those kinds of potato chips. Is it that kind of thing? Because I don't have like necessarily an addictive personality. I'm pretty good at, like, you know, being disciplined when it comes to addictive things. So it's like, if I want to eat a donut, I know that I can have just one. But some people maybe struggle with that more. Is that like a part of this conversation that you think is relevant?
I think that one of the things that causes people to binge on foods is restricting it and telling yourself that it's bad for you. Like, this has been demonstrated before. And so if you don't see it as something bad, and you don't see it as something that's off limits, and you say, like, for example, when I have donuts on Sunday, I have my son, we get donuts, and he, like, I let him pick. He gets a dozen donut holes and sometimes like 3 donuts. Yeah. We kind of share that, and sometimes, like, I notice, like, because I don't pay attention to him, I'm playing basketball and he's kind of on the side dribbling and stuff. He doesn't even touch him. Like, the Sunday, he didn't even touch him because it's not off limit. If I said you can never have donuts, and he went with his grandma and she got him a dozen donuts, he's gonna eat all dozen, and he's gonna have zero control around it because it's so off limits, and it's been labeled as something bad, so that when you do get access to it, it's like, oh, I have to eat as much as I can on this specific occasion, because who knows when the next time I'll be able to eat this again is. And this is what a lot of people do. I see this all the time, and this is one of the biggest struggles people have with like losing weight, is they'll restrict a lot of the foods that they enjoy, and then on the weekends or they go to a party or whatever, and they'll just go crazy, and then they feel guilty. And that guilt sometimes leads to, you know, one day of going crazy turns into 3, 4, 5, instead of, you know, just having, like, for example, me, like if there's something that I really enjoy, I have a small amount of it and I move on. And I have an addictive personality, like 100% I do. And but I've never you know, restricted things in that way. Or I mean, I did at one point. Like in my 20s, I completely, like, I wouldn't eat anything that wasn't processed, or that was processed. And I was on a super, like, it was when I first got, you know, interested in nutrition, started listening to all these podcasts, started books, all these New York Times best-selling books that were telling me that this was poison and this was poison, and I got to stay away from this, and this causes inflammation. And that was before I actually started reading research and started working with people and started really understanding, like, okay, yeah, that can be problematic, but at the end of the day, as long as I'm not overeating, as long as I'm meeting my nutrient needs, like including these foods as a part of my dietary pattern is not a problem. And this is where I you know, kind of commented on that post of like, we get away from labeling things as like, it's not a black or white thing. It's not like, oh, this is bad. We don't need to be assigning like a moral value to food. Food is nourishment. So we need to look at it from a nutritional standpoint as opposed to like a moral standpoint. And unfortunately, a lot of the messaging on here on social media is it's around morality. Like, I eat a cleaner diet than you do, so I'm, you know,
a better person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, yeah, I guess like to say like beer is bad because I'm an alcoholic and my family's a bunch of alcoholics is not accurate, because I can have a beer after, like, you know, a hard day at work and it's delicious and it's amazing, and it's not about that. So yeah, I'm with you on that. Why is it that doctors don't know anything about nutrition? Like, I've talked to a lot of really like well-respected, like well-known doctors, and they've admitted that like they get whatever 6 weeks of nutrition training, if that. And I think that is adding to some of this chaos that you're seeing as well, is that like there's so many people that don't know, and then you can pick random studies, then scientists in general from all these different places, or health people, like some of the people I mentioned, like Rhonda Patrick, I think is brilliant, but she's like taking all this data and she's just compiling data, but she might be obviously missing points. Like I guess is that why this is so tricky? Plus sorry, there's another thing is like bodies are so different. Some people are just furnaces that you could just dump a ton of donuts and they'll never gain weight. I had a kid a couple of years ago who was making fun of a girl in the class for being overweight, and I pulled him aside. Instead of like just like yelling at him, I was like, he's on the basketball team. I was like, how much do you eat? He's like, oh, a lot. I was like, do you think you eat more than her? He's like, yeah. I was like, think about that. So you're making fun of her for overeating when you actually overeat more than that. And there was like, I think it was a good approach because it helped him to understand like how bodies are different too. So I know there's a lot there, but that's like kind of all this information that's all around me that I'm like, this is such a tricky concept. And I'm so glad to talk about the nuance of it.
Yeah. So doctors, they are never going to understand nutrition in the way that someone who's trained in nutrition will. Nutrition is an incredibly complicated subject, and it's, in my opinion, is just as complicated as practicing medicine.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, you know, there's differences in genetics and specific responses to foods based on genetics and other factors as well. You know, your metabolic needs based on the amount of exercise that you're getting. I was the same way. Like I ate everything in sight when I was a kid. I used to eat nothing but processed food, but I played basketball 5 hours a day, and I was thin, you know? So that didn't negatively affect me, it didn't negatively affect me. Honestly, I had some like allergies and asthma stuff that improved when I improved my diet, like later on in life. And even though I wasn't overweight, improving the nutritional quality of my diet still had, you know, a positive effect on my health. But doctors are never going to be the answer when it comes to nutrition. Right now, they're actually increasing the requirements for nutritional education in medical school. But what we really need to do from a healthcare standpoint is train doctors to refer better. Because right now, the referral systems are pretty crappy. The insurance payment systems are pretty crappy. So if you go to your doctor and they have no clue, and then they don't know who to refer you to, and then if they did refer you to someone, you know, insurance isn't going to cover it, so it has to come out of pocket. It creates a lot of barriers for most individuals. So that's, I mean, it's my career. Like that is why I got into this field, is because I recognized early on that nutrition is a form of medicine. That's the way that I see it. Nutrition is a form of medicine, and it should be integrated into standard healthcare. And if an individual comes in with prediabetes, they should have access to either a nutritionist or some type of program, maybe delivered online, where, you know, they get prescribed that, insurance companies cover that. But right now there's a lot of red tape to getting to that point. And one of the biggest reasons, in my opinion, is that nutrition science is quite young overall. Like 25 years ago, 30 years ago, it was really a guessing game. Like we had some epidemiological studies, but we didn't have all these studies where most of the studies that I discuss on various topics and things like that, it's all from 2000 on. Like almost like if you go before 2000, there wasn't that many randomized controlled trials. There wasn't that many nutrition scientists.
Why is that a tech thing? Like they just didn't have, or was it not funded? Like what? Why could we have been on this for a long time?
It wasn't funded, and we didn't understand how important it was. Like that, it didn't start coming onto the radar until like obesity and diabetes and all these things started to be a problem. And then we realized like, oh wow, nutrition helps with this. Let's start funding some studies. And you know, studies have been funded. We've shown that you can reverse diabetes, you can improve IBS, inflammatory bowel disease, and the body of literature on these various topics is building and improving. And now it's just a matter of taking that body of literature and now figuring out the best way to translate that into traditional medical care. And of course, we need to go beyond that because we need to make some changes in the environment and try to, you know, make healthy foods more accessible to individuals. And you know, just there's multiple levels that need to be addressed. But in my opinion, the most important level that really that has the highest potential for improving people's overall health or really reducing a lot of the misinformation online is if someone gets diagnosed with a health issue, they need to get the proper guidance through the healthcare system so that they don't go on Google. And then if you go on Google and you type in, you know, how do I diet for IBS, it's going to be whoever's trying to sell you whatever program, and oftentimes it's not going to be based on science. It's just whoever's the best marketer, and that's what this space historically over the last 20 years, and I see the shift starting to occur. But what you have seen in the nutrition space is you're going to get exposed. Like if you're trying to learn about nutrition, the information that you're going to get exposed to is not going to come from the best source, the most science-based source. It's just going to come from who the best marketers are. And unfortunately, scientists are really bad at marketing overall, and not really good at communicating with the public that well oftentimes, because if you're doing science and you're doing research and all you're ever doing is, you know, talking to other scientists, it's difficult to turn around and communicate that information to a general audience who may not be as educated as you. And so I think that we're seeing a shift in you know, more science-based creators coming online and trying to help you know, provide information that's more accurate, but there's no financial incentive for that. Like if I turned around and started making wild claims and telling people that I can heal their gut and stuff like that, I could triple my income like tomorrow, you know, but there's no financial incentive for providing balanced information that's accurate, that people can actually apply and improve their health with. So that's why you see all these in finance, you know, the money is what drives a lot of, you know, the production and everything else that goes into running a business and getting information out to people, the ads and all of that. If you're not doing that stuff, it's harder to get onto those platforms in the way that you know, some individuals can do.
Yeah, I think that's what was so frustrating though, just on the other side, was when I found out that this, you know, talking about how like when you demonize food, it's like, you know, it's whatever, it's like colonization or whatever they called it. Like it was like just like the woke stuff, was that it was funded by craft, basically craft foods. So it's like, don't say that these foods are bad. when you as a nutritionist who doesn't have a dog in the fight other than to help people to live a nutritious life, it could be the same message, but it's a different message than someone who's trying to sell you, you know, junk food, or is trying to sell you cookies and stuff like that. If someone who's is a cookie salesman says cookies, don't demonize cookies, it's just different than someone who's in your position saying don't demonize cookies. Even though the words are the same, I take it very, very differently. You know what I mean?
I completely agree with you there, and honestly, this is the reason. So in nutrition, the certification that you get, like the to become a practicing dietitian, is from the American Dietetics Association. You know, you get an RD, registered dietitian. That is the reason that I didn't want to get it, is because of the amount of funding that, and the amount, like how tied they were in food companies, and unfortunately, there's a lot of dietitians that, you know, take that online, to be honest, and they're promoting food companies and promoting foods that, and without the nuance, and the public trust in registered dietitians is crap, and it should be, because of, or not it should be, because some of them are great, but to be honest, like a lot of them are they're not very well trained, because all you need is a bachelor's degree in nutrition to get an RD, and that's not enough. Like, nutrition is too complicated for that. And then also the fact that so many RDs continue to promote, you know, these different companies, I think that just really damages public trust. So then individuals, as you mentioned, and as we had, you know, kind of in our discussion, like a lot of people turn to individuals who aren't trained in this topic, who have, you know, neuroscientists or biologists, physicists, or whatever the case may be. And unfortunately, a lot of that is because of, you know, some of this underlying ties to the food industry from the major dietetics association that certifies a lot of these dietitians. And then some of them end up going online and promoting some of these things. Like, I'm not opposed to saying, hey, you know, cereal's fine, but to do an ad for cereal on your Instagram is going to continue to sow mistrust from the public amongst the people who are supposed to be trained to be helping, you know, to provide nutrition information. So I'm with you on that. Like, that stuff bothers me, with like people promoting the wrong, like people just working for food companies essentially. But at the same time, people are getting information from influencers who are all doing the same thing. Like, they're all promoting their supplements or specific companies. They have their coupon codes, and we got to just really be aware of, you know, those, you know, it's hard. It's really just hard for the consumer, to be honest. And I understand it completely. You know, I fell into all of these same things in my early 20s, and that's why I really try to, you know, be as honest as possible on here and try to provide as, you know, as nuanced information as I can.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate that, man, because I reached out to the ladies in that video and they blocked me and they didn't want to talk to me. So, I mean, like, if you are lost in this kind of, it makes sense that you'd be lost. You know, is some of this just like a heuristic? Like, just say it's evil because it's probably not ideal, or you know, like paleo, like the closer it is from nature to your belly, the better, less processed. Is that just like a way to just, because it's so complex, and you can understand that complex and weed through it because it's your life, but for the average person, they can't go through all that stuff. So is it just like, stick to as close to natural as possible, because it's just like, it's like I said, like a heuristic to just, is that what's going on here, and is that necessarily a bad thing?
It's just certain marketing messages, just that they're easy. Like, people want black and white, but it might be a bad thing, because that's just not how the world works. And if we continue, same thing with politics and everything else. Like, we need to look at be more critical thinkers in all areas of our lives, and not just gravitate towards these good or bad, you know, eat it if it's natural, don't if it's not. Because if you tell yourself, okay, you only eat, you know, natural, unprocessed, straight from nature foods, you know how much time that takes? Like, and you know, a lot of these people who are saying, you know, only eat natural, processed, straight from nature foods, they're still promoting processed foods. They're just promoting the more expensive ones that are, like, you know, quote unquote healthier. But like I mentioned earlier, like, these, if you go into Whole Foods, like, most of those foods they're not natural. They're processed foods. They're just more expensive, and they have a health halo attached to them. But the reality is those foods aren't that much different than the things at the regular grocery store. They just make people feel like they're doing something in terms of.
Yeah, well, that's like vegans who eat, you know, Oreos and French fries all the time and thinking that it's healthy. But like, if you, let's just say you want to get like a, you know, like beef with like a bed of greens and olive oil or something like that, like that's like closer, I guess. But even olive oil is still processed. You know, like
Even processed, like you're not biting it right off the cow. Like,
yeah,
there's a couple of levels of. So this is where there, you can't define processed and unprocessed. It's a spectrum of, and this is why when you see, like in my messaging, I'll say try to eat most of your diet from unprocessed or minimally processed foods. And almost every time that I put that anywhere, I try to describe what I mean by that. Like corn is unprocessed, you know, corn tortillas are minimally processed, and then corn chips are going to be more processed, and then Cheetos are going to be kind of way on the other end where they add fat and flavorings and colors and things like that, where, you know, it's not that if you eat any of these, you know, dyes or any of that, like it's going to destroy your health. It's just right now the American diet is made up of 60% of ultra processed foods, which means that, you know, it's not corn, it's the chips, the Cheetos, and the things that have been, you know, they've been processed down, the texture's been changed, they've added, you know, different colors and flavorings to them to make them more palatable, to make them more, like you mentioned, like you can't eat just one, to make you want to eat more of it. And it's the problem isn't, you know, just the small amounts of these ingredients that you might consume in that. The problem is that if you're eating a lot of these foods, you're most likely going to overeat, and you're overeating, you're going to gain weight, and you're also not going to be meeting your nutrient needs, because a lot of these things are stripped of some of the natural nutrition that would come in the, you know, in the corn. You're going to get carotenoids and different things, you know, some fiber, where you're not going to get that in the end product of the Cheeto.
Okay, I'm going to ask you two questions, put you on the spot a little bit. You are now during COVID, I was quite upset that they didn't talk about like healthy lifestyle at all. Like it wasn't about exercise or diet at all. And that was really frustrating. So let's just say we get a president in, not disparaging our president, but like we get someone in and says, all right, we're going to make nutrition an important part of this country. And you, sir, Adrian Chavez, are going to be in charge of this. What would you think would be a good way to, even if it's not through policy or regulation, like what would you essentially promote? And I think you can also take this for like advise, like, you know, for K through 12 kids, who that was aimed for. But what if you have like a quick, and people will see your content and people already follow you and stuff like that. But for those who don't, in like a quick kind of like elevator pitch type of thing, what do you think are some big moves that we could do as a country to be a more nutritious population?
Quality nutrition education in K through 12 would be number one, and then two would be, as I mentioned earlier, integrating nutrition professionals, evidence-based nutrition into the healthcare system. So when you go to the doctor, every doctor should be trained in, okay, you have prediabetes, and to like, this is what I plan to do with my career, and this is where I'm like trying to move towards in the next like 5 or 10 years, is build a company around this, where we create online programs and group coaching where this can all be done virtually at a lower cost than actually meeting with a dietitian every day or every month or whatever the case may be, and where we provide evidence-based information that if you have prediabetes, these are the things that are going to help. And you get access to this online program, you get access to a coach that helps you implement these changes. If we can just do those two things, educate younger individuals, and then have point of care in the medical system where people are getting, you know, directed towards the right information. If you have high blood pressure, like there's evidence-based guidelines to reduce blood pressure that almost anyone can get off of medication or not need medication for blood pressure if they implement these guidelines. So we could put together, like I said, this is what I'm trying to do with my career, is like put together these programs where we can give people access to the information, and you know, people also need support and accountability to a certain extent. But if we can put these pieces together and educate people early on, and then get people, you know, once they start developing health problems, because that's when people are most motivated to change. If you go to the doctor and they say, hey, you have prediabetes, people are most motivated to change at that point in time. And they go online and look for information, and they get told that they need to cut out all carbs and go carnivore, and things like that. Whereas if we could provide them with the right information at that point, I think those two things will be the most impactful overall.
I think I'm with you. I think education. I'm in education, so I think it's a way to solve everything. So I'm with you. That's, again, why I'm so grateful to have you on here to talk about this. I also wanted to ask you about gut microbiome, because I've done like fasting, I've done keto, I've tried a whole bunch of different things, and I found that I cut out sugar, like all sugar. Like I would have like maybe a handful of blackberries, but like really even like fructose, just for a little bit, just to try it out. And I didn't crave it. I craved it for the first like couple of like weeks or whatever, maybe not even, maybe a week or two, and then I didn't crave it anymore. How does that work with like, if you, because I guess what it is I see these little kids eating a lot of junk food or whatever you want to call it. Okay. Ultra processed food. And then when you give them like an apple, it's just like, oh my gosh, their body seems to get used to it. Is this not true that your body gets used to that kind of ultra processed stuff and all those things and the sugars and stuff like that, and your gut microbiome like craves it? Because that's what I've always heard, and I don't know. Now that I have you here, I'd love to know if that's true.
That's microbiome. Anyone's trying to speak about the gut microbiome is probably not providing quality information, because we cannot even measure our microbiome right now. Like, we can't measure it. Like, we can look at what comes out in your poop, but that's gut microbiome. We have 27 feet of intestinal tract, and there's certain microbes in the small intestine. There's certain microbes in the distal part of the small intestine. There's certain microbes in the colon.
And there's a lot, right? I mean, there's more cells than even.
There's 40 trillion microbes, and they're scattered throughout our intestines, and we can't measure it. Like, we literally can't measure the microbiome right now. So when people talk about like the microbiome or the microbiota, is what it's like. Microbiome actually includes the totality of the microbes in our entire body, not just in our gut, because we basically are a cloud of floating black bacteria. Like, we have like microbes that are like floating around us that kind of follow us around. Like, that's what our microbiome is referring to. When we say gut microbiota is what it's called, like the microbes that kind of inhabit our GI tract, we can't even measure it right now. And we don't really understand like the different changes that occur through different dietary factors. It's so variable from person to person. It's so complex. Like, there's no good way to say, oh, this is being caused by your gut microbiome, because we can't measure it, and there's not good research on that at this moment. That's just microbiome. Oftentimes people are using that to sound like they know what they're talking about, or make it, when we talk about like hormone balance and microbiome, these are buzzwords that just right now in the wellness industry, they sound good, and they get people's attention, and they make it sound like, oh, there's this next level of complexity that I understand that other people don't, because I'm talking about how these things interact with the microbiome. But that's usually not accurate at all. What's happening is, like, the first time you ate spicy food, it tasted really spicy. And then if you keep eating it, it tastes a little bit less spicy over time. We become desensitized to the flavors that we expose ourselves to. Same thing with salt, same thing with sugar. If you're exposing yourself to a lot of salt, you're going to be desensitized to it. And then when you eat something that has a normal amount of salt, it's going to taste bland. That happens with every taste. So I agree with you. A lot of these kids, and I see it in, I went to my son's, when I go to my son's lunch, everyone's drinking like a Gatorade or Capri Sun. Like, that's not ideal. Like, that is creating, that's shifting their taste perceptions to the point that they're probably going to crave more sweet foods more often. And, that I'm not a fan of that. So that would be like when it comes to education, that would be something that would be a big, hey, let's avoid these sugar sweetened beverages because they've shown to have negative effects, and what it can alter, how it can alter your taste perception can potentially, like, if you're drinking that throughout the day and you're not having water, like, there's a lot of kids that won't even drink water, like, because they're used to that sweet taste. And you working in school, I'm sure, like, a lot of kids that the only drinks they'll have are drinks that are already sweetened, and that can be a problem in terms of taste perception. It's not about the microbiome. It's more of like a sensory, you know, you become desensitized to those tastes when you eat them a lot, and then when you take them away, you have a little bit of that sugar. It tastes more intense than it would otherwise. So that's what's going on more so than the microbiome. The microbiome thing, like I mentioned, we just have absolutely no idea. Pathopotential, I don't know what, like, see, this is what I was talking about earlier. This guy saying like 99% of the grocery store is poison. Like that's so far from reality. Like that's so far from reality. Poison means that something's gonna kill you.
Like,
Like,
you have to define poison, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
But that's so far from reality. But those words, using those words and speaking in that way doesn't help anyone. Like that's the type of language that is really, you're not teaching anything. Like, who's learning by you saying 99% of the grocery store is poison? You're just scaring the crap out of people. And that's, again, the part that really bothers me about this wellness space is like, these people will say these things, and then people will hear it, and then they'll be compelled by it, and then they'll repeat it over and over again. It's not reality. It's not poison. There are people who live to 100 eating complete processed foods.
Right.
If it was poison, how would that happen? Like, it's just so far detached from like the reality of nutrition, and it doesn't help anyone when people use these terms and repeat these terms that they hear over and over again. Like, it's just it's only doing harm. And if that's how you're thinking about nutrition, you probably need to get some help with that, because like, if you're feeling like, oh my God, all of this stuff is poison, like there's programming that has gone on there that is just, it's not reality. It really isn't.
You know, Adrian, I think you and I are similar. I'm in like the kind of social science, political space, and you're in nutrition. Both of them are so nuanced, but people just want easy, like you said, the binary. They want the black and white. They want it's all good, eat whatever you want, it doesn't matter, food is food, or no, everything's poison. And the truth is somewhere in the middle. I'm like that with all these political issues. It's like, it's not so simple. I wish it was. It would make my job a lot easier, but it's almost not. It's not sexy though to go out there with all this nuance. It's hard, because especially on something like social media, which is all bite-sized stuff. People love bite-sized stuff. We've been talking now for like 47 minutes, and I feel like we're not even, like, we're just barely scratching the surface. And that's just the reality with these kinds of things. And I think people just don't have time. They don't have the interest to dive into this. So just like, give me something simple. Let me just give me something to believe in. I'm just going to go red team, blue team, whatever that is. And that makes it really tough. So is the best pathway forward to have conversations, debates? Like, there could be other nutritionists that disagree with you, and, you know, people maybe in the comment section here that might disagree with you, and your time is valuable, my time's valuable. Like, there's only so much, their time's valuable, so there's only so much we can do. But is the pathway forward like through like conversations with two people in that space to try and like work it out and have people listen, and then make their call for which one is the most convincing? I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
No?
I think we need to listen to people who are trained in the space, who actually work in this space.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm sorry to cut you off, but like there are probably nutritionists that might hold a different stance than you on these things.
There are, but the vast majority of people who have a master's level education in nutrition and a research background,
okay,
and experience working with people, the vast majority are in very similar, like,
okay.
like I can, like, for example, Dr. Ids was on here earlier.
Mm-hmm.
He has a degree in nutrition, really research based. I can watch one of his videos and know that he's like, we are going to be almost 100% in line.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never heard his opinion on that topic, because the research is, you know, there. Like the science that helps to guide us and understand these topics is not something that is, you know, that one person. And the reason that you see some of these interpretations that are so far off is because, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these dietitians, they just have a bachelor's degree and they don't know how to read research. So
yeah, or they're getting paid to take a certain stance.
Yeah. So what they got taught though, is sometimes, you know, sometimes it's outdated at the point that, you know, once they get online and start doing, or once they start communicating with individuals online, some of the information's outdated, and they're susceptible oftentimes to a lot of this marketing and stuff as well, because, you know, if someone tells you seed oils are toxic and you don't know how to read the research and understand that, okay, when we feed people these oils, we don't actually see any negative effects. If you don't know how to do that, then you're no better than, you know, you're in no better of a position than the average population to be able to teach and communicate on that topic. And so I think if you're looking at, like, if you go into an academic institution, or if you go to an academic conference where everyone's a PhD in nutrition and we're talking about these topics, there's not much disagreement, and it's not that everyone's like, hey, let's get together and agree on these things. It's, you know, we're looking at data and studies and experience of working with people as well, and when you take people who have a pretty strong background in that, on most topics there's going to be agreement, and when there is disagreement, usually it's due to, you know, small nuances that can explain that. And so I have no interest in debating people on you know, on various topics or anything like that. The thing that I try to do is simplify the things that matter, and help people focus on the things that matter. Don't overeat. You know, if you're overeating to the point you're gaining weight, and that's leading you to become, you know, a weight that's negatively affecting your health, that's probably one of the biggest factors that needs to be taken into account with nutrition. Making sure that you're getting the right number of nutrients, like making sure that you're meeting your vitamin and mineral needs, making sure that you're meeting, you know, you're getting plenty of fiber, making sure that you're getting plenty of protein. If you're hitting those things, and you know, those are the things that matter when it comes to nutrition. Like there's and so the message, as you mentioned earlier, is not as sexy because I'm basically repeating the same things over and over again in all my different ways, to get people to understand these things, because those are the things that matter, and teaching them the, you know, some of the nuances and some of the, you know, these foods, you know, provide certain nutrition for various things. Like, for example, like dark chocolate, there's some evidence that it can have certain benefits. So talking about those things. But then when I talk about dark chocolate, I don't say, you know, everyone should eat dark chocolate because there's a study that showed this. It's like, dark chocolate is good, but make sure you're eating it in the context of first getting these other important pieces in place, and then adding these things on top of that, and you know, focusing on further refining your nutrition can be important, but we have to focus on these big picture items first. And this is where I think it's just simplifying the messaging so that people can take actionable steps, as opposed to feeling like they're just overwhelmed by people debating seed. Like, there's absolutely no point in me debating some other individual on seed oils when I like the simple improvement that most people can make is just eat less oil. Like I mentioned earlier, like there's debating a seed oil versus an olive oil, you know, that we can talk about that for 3 hours, or we could just say what's going to have the biggest impact, people reducing their overall consumption of oil, and we don't have to have any debate beyond that. That's going to have the biggest impact.
Yeah, like a runner talking about, these shoes are better than these shoes because they're 3 ounces less. It's like, no, just run a little bit more.
Just run though, About it done. And so this is where sometimes that those big rocks get lost in the debates about these little things. And you know, I love all the intricate details of nutrition, like, because that's what I do, and I love to read about it and learn about it and have conversations about it with colleagues and things like that. But arguing that stuff online, I don't think is helpful for the end consumer.
Yeah, I do want to let you go. The last thing I do want to ask, because this is just like a quick one though, is one of the things David Sinclair, who I do like, not for nutrition necessarily, just for longevity, he said like this heuristic again, which is eat less often. Do you also focus on like the time constricted eating and how that is an effect? Because that's something that I have found that if I can eat more like processed foods or something, but if I eat in a smaller window, that seems to be an overlap of a lot of people who disagree, even when it comes to nutrition stuff, is time restricted eating is generally better. Would you be in that camp or no?
There's zero evidence for that. Like,
really?
There's no evidence for time restricted eating being better for longevity or any other outcome whatsoever. the reason that a lot of people feel better when they do that is because they eat less. And so they eat less, they lose weight, they're getting the benefits of losing weight. When we do randomized control trials where we feed two groups of people, one of them over a 12 or 16-hour period, and the other group, we restrict their eating window to 8 hours, and you equate calories between the two groups, weight loss is the same, improvements in insulin sensitivity are the same, improvements in lipids are the same. Like if you're eating the same food, it doesn't matter the period of time that you're eating it over. Again, this is where I say David Sinclair is one of those people who looks at the mechanisms of certain things and applies that without looking at the actual outcome studies. Because when you're fasting, there are changes in the in the cell and within the body that seem to make it look beneficial. But those same changes occur when you're just restricting calories and you're not fasting. But those changes are more pronounced when you're fasting, but then you're overeating during that 8-hour window. So like you're canceling out some of those more pronounced changes. And at the end of the day, it really just comes down to energy balance, not eating window or anything like that. And I first read some of these studies about fasting over a decade ago, like probably 12 years ago. And, before they hadn't really compared it to caloric restriction. So like I think it was probably 2010-ish, like so a lot of these studies about fasting were coming out, and they were just, oh, when people fast and, restrict their eating to an 8-hour window, they show all these health improvements. But over the last decade, there's been so many randomized controlled trials where they're controlling for calories and they're comparing the two dietary patterns, and there's no differences. And I used to fast all the time because of it. Like I
still do.
I would go 16, 18 hours. I would go 24-hour fast, like all the time. I was doing all this fasting and stuff, and I just lost a bunch of muscle, to be honest. Like there was nothing beyond that I gained from that except for being hungry a lot of the time and losing muscle. And it can make it easier for you to maintain a calorie deficit, especially if you're not eating, if you're not eating, like if you're eating processed foods and more energy dense foods and things like that. Fasting can help you to maintain a calorie deficit or manage your energy intake, but that's all. Like that's the only benefit you get.
Oh man, you're spoiling me. I'm trying to.
I mean, I literally I lost a bunch of muscle during the periods of time where I was fasting, and I didn't realize why. And it's because when you go for 16, 18 hours without eating, your body's going to start breaking down muscle in order to get that fuel. And I wasn't eating 80 grams of protein at each of my meals, so I wasn't able to get as much protein as I can over 3 or 4 meals. And so that was leading to a negative effect on muscle, and it gave me more flexibility, like in terms of like, oh, I could eat just a big burger for dinner or whatever, but that has 50 grams of protein, and I wasn't meeting my overall protein needs throughout the day, and ended up and then my workout suffered because I'm fasting for hours, and then my workouts are worse. Like I've done it all, and that's why that's why I have compassion and understand like what drives people to do some of these things. I've of it. I mean, even some of the stuff the Path of Potential saying, like there was a period of time where I would because I had some health issues and I went to the doctor, they couldn't help me. They told me nutrition, like that's what got me into this space. I went to a doctor, I had some GI issues. They said nutrition didn't matter. I changed my nutrition and improved, made it go away essentially. And to me, I was like, oh, these doctors are horrible and evil, and this is a big conspiracy against nutrition. And it got into all this, thought processes around nutrition. And that was I started taking all these random supplements that I would hear on podcasts. I used to take like a dozen supplements a day, spending like, $250, $300 a month on supplements. I was fasting. I did everything. And I'm healthier now that I take no supplements. Like, I don't fast. Like I just pay attention to the big rocks. Like I don't overeat. I eat mostly unprocessed foods. I exercise on a regular basis, and all of that mental energy and all of the money that I was spending on those things, I can place it elsewhere where it can benefit my health as well, because a lot of people are getting entirely too focused on every little thing about nutrition, and then they're ignoring their mental health, they're ignoring their sleep, they're ignoring exercise. I can't tell you how many people I've met that are like, oh, I won't touch high fructose corn syrup, for example, and they like avoid it like the plague because it's poison, and then they don't exercise. Like makes no sense. Like exercise alone, the benefits of exercise far outweigh probably every nutritional change that you can make, or not far outweigh every nutrient, but it's about the same. So like that's where, you know, over focusing on certain things, and this, I always say it, like I say this pretty often on my page, like if you follow a lot of these podcasts and stuff, they're going to distract you oftentimes from what's important. So you'll think, oh, I have to take omega-3 and collagen and CBD, and I have to do ice baths, and none of this stuff is important. Like like ice baths, there's no evidence for benefits of ice baths.
Yeah, or maybe once you get to the point where you're a great runner, then maybe you get the shoes with the 3 ounces. But most people are not.
Exactly. 90%, 99%. Like it's a large percentage of the population who's not sleeping enough. They're overstressing about dumb stuff. They're you know, not eating a mostly unprocessed diet. They don't understand their energy needs or how to meet them. And it's really just comes down to understanding a lot of these things. The main factors and getting consistent with them. And like I said on my page, like my posts are mostly saying the same thing over and over again in different ways. Because my goal is not to have a bunch of people who feel like they need me to learn about the newest thing. My goal is if someone follows me and they've been consuming my content for a while, I want them to be able to take some actionable steps to improve their health.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this, man. We did a full hour. I really appreciate you. And I'm really confused still, but I think it's great, and I really appreciate you coming on here and everything that you're doing. And I'll be following your stuff, you know, very closely now because it's excellent. So thank you, man. Really.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Good one. Bye.
Thanks, guys, for listening.